I'm really honored to be here with you all, and I'm always honored to be able to speak about Omar ibn Said. I start with the primary sources, the materials, the unique materials that are held at Wilson Special Collections Library, which is an archive, and it's at UNC Chapel Hill in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm just going to really briefly just to give you an overview of what I do and why I'm here and what we do at our library. And I'm going to walk through a research guide that I put together that's completely free and available online, and includes digitized versions of the primary sources that we hold here in our library that we would love for you to take and use and teach with, I think in combination with this amazing workbook, which has already been matched up with curriculum standards. And so I just think that in combination too, I think that there are a lot of possibilities. So I think maybe at the end, we'll have some ideas for ways to move forward. So let me share my screen. Okay, so this is the home page for Wilson Library, and I'm only showing it so that I can kind of place us, put us in a place. This library is, again, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I shared the link with you so that you can check it out and see what kind of materials we have, what kind of work we do. I am a teaching librarian, a research and instruction librarian, and so I help people research the history, people, and culture of North Carolina specifically. So that's my subject specialty. And one of the reasons why we have materials related to Omar ibn Said and why there's a North Carolina librarian like myself, why we do so much work with the South and North Carolina, is that my library, this archive, really focuses on collecting materials related to the American South. Okay, and that is a very big and broad subject. It's the global South, it's the diaspora, it's people who have lived here, worked here, been through here, and there is a lot that we can learn from the materials in our collection about slavery in the United States. And so, you know, we have a lot about North Carolina, and it's really a variety of formats. So we have newspapers, photographs, maps, personal private collections, so family collections of letters and diaries, and we also have the records of businesses and organizations. We also hold the records of UNC Chapel Hill itself as an institution. So it's really, you know, that's really our specialty and why I do the work that I do, why we collect what we do, and why we have materials related to Omar ibn Said specifically. So this is the research guide that I put together to really assemble materials that we have related to Omar ibn Said that are actually technically in different parts of our collections. So we don't have an Omar ibn Said collection per se, and some of that I'll be able to go into a little bit of detail. It's because these materials actually came to us in different ways and at different times. But what we have now at Wilson Library is probably the largest one collection of primary sources, unique original materials related to Omar ibn Said of really any institution that we know of. And so this is the homepage here, and I'm going to jump into this particular tab. And what I've done here is list in detail with digitized versions those original materials that we have. Okay, so I'll scroll down just a little bit, but I am going to go up to the top so that I can just step through each one. We have 3 photographs, and we have 3 original manuscripts in Omar ibn Said's hand. And what I was thinking is, you know, I would step through each one of these and talk to you about what I know about them. And some ways that I've used them for teaching, some questions that have come up, some common questions that I see, and just explore some possibilities and approaches for incorporating these particular primary sources into your own teaching. So I'm going to start up at the top here with our photographs. The first one that we have is an ambrotype, which is a photographic format, and it's from around 1855. And one of the things that I do with any of the patrons or students that I work with, and I do work with the general public, with K-12 groups, with undergraduate students, so it's really a variety, but I always try to emphasize, okay, so the time period. What do we know about what was going on in 1855? What do we know, about that particular year? What was going on in North Carolina? What was going on in the South? And, where is this year in Omar ibn Said's lifetime? It's always really profound when we have conversations about Omar ibn Said being almost 40 years old when he was enslaved and came to South Carolina. So, some of these materials, like we have photographs of him as an aging man. And we have manuscripts that were written at different times, but some of them, from his later years as well. So it's a really interesting scope as well from different times in Omar ibn Said's own life. So this one particular ambrotype, I'm just going to open it up so that you can see. Hold on a second. Oh, sorry. Hold on one second. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm just having a little bit of. We had a little bit of a technical issue with one of our photographs kind of disappearing from our database, so I'm sorry for that. But I wanted to just blow this up so that you can see that we have a high resolution scan of each one of these objects or items. And one thing that is very apparent, of course, when I'm able to teach with these materials in person, is that this particular ambrotype is very small. This entire thing, it's encased. This is suede, and then this is kind of a gold gilt decorative frame, and it's in a leather case, and the entire thing is only about maybe 3 by 3 inches. Okay, so this is a very, very small treasure, and there is a lock on the side of it as well. And for some of these materials, to be honest with you, we purchased this particular one in the 1970s. The library did because it was out on the antiquarian market, and that's how we do acquire some of our materials. So who had this created? One would assume a member of the Owen family. But that's a prompt, a prompt for our students and our learners and for ourselves to think through. Who wanted to create this amazing treasure, this keepsake? And so, and then other kinds of prompts could be, to look at his pose, look at his clothing, and other kinds of questions to tap into different kinds of literacies. And luckily we have some other photographs that we can pair with the ambrotype and think about in combination. This one is an albumen print, which is another kind of photographic technique. And this is really interesting because it's on a piece of cardstock, and it actually came to us as part of some family papers. So a white family in Wilmington, very prominent politically, culturally, economically, associates of the Owen family. And one of the reasons why we were donated, why the Dorosset family papers were donated to us by the Dorossets themselves, is because this family had very close ties to UNC Chapel Hill. And so they had this photograph in with their family papers. And this is another potential opportunity for thinking and learning and connecting to other historical and cultural topics. But one person who married into the Dorosset family was Alfred Waddell. And if you are teaching anything about turn of the century North Carolina, and the ascendancy of the Democratic Party in North Carolina on a platform of white supremacy. And Wilmington, 1898, which was in November 1898, there was a massacre and a coup in that city. It is, we have here something very interesting, which is Alfred Waddell, who was one of the orchestrators of Wilmington 1898, and also an associate of the Owen family, an associate of the Drossets, clearly also associated with UNC Chapel Hill. He writes on the front, and it continues on the back, a little biography as far as what he knows about Omar ibn Said. And he calls him Uncle Moreau, calls him an African or Arab prince. So, you know, there's already a lot of questioning that we can encourage our students and our learners to do, okay? Like engaging with this, how much did Alfred Waddell really know about this? And he's reminiscing about Omar ibn Said quite fondly, quite kind of nostalgically. And he's writing this in 1900. And so this is after the coup in Wilmington, which actually made Alfred Waddell mayor of the town. And so he's saying, I knew Omar ibn Said. And so you have all of these connections that are just rising to the surface here for us to latch onto and to start exploring race and power and white supremacy throughout many, many decades. And so we know that Omar ibn Said passed away in 1865. And so, you know, why would, 1905 was when he wrote, when he signed this 1905, but around 1900, why would these very prominent, powerful white politicians, why would they still be talking about Omar ibn Said? You know, what's going on there in North Carolina? What are their motivations? And reminiscing about Omar ibn Said specifically, like what role does that play in their own worldview? We also have a carte de visite, which we know to be from about the same time period because of the photographic technology, the format. This was very common around the turn of the 20th century, late 1800s. And this is really only, this is also quite small. It's probably about 3 by 5 inches. And it's quite faded, but we have a scan of the front and the back, and it was produced at this photographic studio in Wilmington as a keepsake. And these were created in bulk. Okay, so this wasn't the only one. This is probably, I mean, this is the only one that we know of. And it also came to us as part of a collection of family papers. Another family associated with UNC Chapel Hill who had family, political, and economic ties with the families enslaving, the Owen family, but other families, other enslaving families in the Fayetteville, Wilmington area, so the Cape Fear region. And so, you know, why a photograph of Omar ibn Said came to us as part of the Cornelia Phillips Spencer papers, we don't know exactly, but that's again another really compelling prompt that I try to put forward in certain learning contexts. You know, why, you know, and it helps us to understand the archive too. Why are things kept? What importance do these things potentially, do you think that they have for the people who kept them and collected them? And how do you know, how did they end up in an archive? You know, an archive being a place where things are, you know, kept and saved forever. You know, this was certainly a treasure. And so, you know, how can we use what we do know to try and think through some of these things? You know, we're making educated guesses and we're telling stories based on good information that we're gathering from lots of different primary sources. So one thing that I wanted to note too is, you know, the materiality of these things is very important, clearly. And one thing is somebody, we would have to assume someone in this particular family, this Spencer family, wrote in pencil Christian above him, and it's actually from a poem, Christian, the Highest Style of Man. So when I was putting together this guide, I mean, I did a fair amount of research myself just to try and give as much information. I can't write essays about each particular item, but enough information to try and help people, at least kind of get started and start making some connections. But I found that it was a quote from a particular poem called Night Thoughts by Edward Young. And this is something that is, so Omar ibn Said's conversion to Christianity is something that is another really important event, and very important for us to consider, because there is actually a lot of question, and this question comes from the sources themselves about that conversion, and imagining what Omar ibn Said's spiritual life, his inner spiritual life, what that could have been. And there's a lot that we don't know. We have his autobiography, but these manuscripts really complicate the understanding and what was really emphasized by his enslavers, that he had completely converted to Christianity. And this was stated by them, like in newspapers, and affirmed by a lot of people talking about Omar ibn Said, that it was a full conversion, no reminiscing, no remnants of any of this other religion. But in these documents themselves, that is complicated. And that's something that is important for us to work through together and with our students, and to try and hold that, and to know that it's not prescribed. And we actually don't know, we won't ever know, because there are so few of these documents available for us to really say one way or the other. But one is this particular document, and I'll just hold on 1 second. Sorry, I think okay, here we go. Is this particular document, and this is very common for, well, common, there's so few of these documents, but the way that this particular manuscript, this writing in Omar ibn Said's hand, the way it was created was how many of these documents came to be, which was that the Owen family actually traveled with Omar ibn Said, which they didn't do with the other people that they enslaved. They enslaved hundreds of people, but they took Omar ibn Said with them to various vacation spots, hot springs, which was very typical for the white elite to do before the Civil War. And at these hot springs, other people would ask, can I meet Omar ibn Said? He was very famous. And he would be asked by the Owen family and by, this person, can you write something? That became kind of a thing, like, here's something that Omar ibn Said wrote. It's something that you can keep. And this is just an example where, this particular man receiving this put it into a scrapbook, and then the scrapbook was donated to us by a descendant of this man. And it's a really beautiful piece, and very well kept. And he says this was written by an African in Wilmington in 1856. It's the 23rd Psalm. But this is where it's really, so there's a signature here, but it is the 23rd Psalm, but this beginning part is actually praising Muhammad. So this is where, we can work with the translations, and we can try and say, okay, what's going on here? This is a very complicated thing, and very important for us to grapple with. So we have this one document, which actually came to us in a scrapbook. And we also have this one. This is just another really interesting sort of tension, I guess you could say, or complication. We have I'm going to scroll down here, this one. So this was another piece that was written by Omar ibn Said and given to a person in 1857. The person receiving it, her name was Mary Jones, and she received it at the Rock, Rock Alum Springs. And she says, this is the Lord's Prayer. You know, I met Omar ibn Said, he wrote the Lord's Prayer. We know that Omar ibn Said had an Arabic language Bible that the Owen family purchased for him. That Bible is actually held at Davidson College, but this is not the Lord's Prayer. This is actually Surat al-Nazr, which is from the Quran. So again, this is very, very interesting and very very clearly complicates what we know and what was emphasized to be, you know, the fact of Omar ibn Said's conversion to Christianity, and you know what his spiritual life really was, and is really important. And that's why starting with these sources can be so revelatory, but also why it's not prescribed. I mean, that can be really exciting, but also you know, something that we really do have to work through together. You know, we scaffold this for our students to help them, you know, with certain questions to help them think through this. But there will be contradictions. There will be unanswered questions, even with these sources, which are very rare. I mean, we really typically don't have materials related to the lives of most enslaved people. If an enslaved person could write or was allowed to write, you know, which was of course legally, I mean, that was not legal. But you know, for Omar ibn Said, he was encouraged to write by the Owen family. It was a part of actually their social life, actually, was to have Omar ibn Said there and to introduce him to the people. So we have these 3 documents. They're here and digitized for you to use. I have also listed here the other kind of scattered primary sources, if you will, related to Omar ibn Said. There's a photograph at Yale, and some other opportunities to maybe put these sources in conversation and to match them up with the workbook, which I think is a very exciting idea. And you know, to try and ask these questions. I mean, we know, and the workbook says that in 1819, which was, you know, much earlier than the autobiography that he wrote, 1819, he is asking the Owen family, release me, I want to go back home to Africa. And that in conversation, if you will, or in opposition to, I'm scrolling down here, to a lot of the newspapers. So I link out to digitized newspapers because there was a lot written about Omar ibn Said, even during his lifetime, but at his death, and after his death, even decades after his death, sort of reminiscing about the Arab prince, Uncle Moreau, you know, all of these myths, and, you know, intertwined with some facts and real events. But a lot of these newspapers, they say he never ever wanted to go back to Africa. He was committed to the Owen family, and he never ever sought his freedom. But we know that that's not true. And so you have these primary sources in conflict with one another. And so making these sort of, maybe looking at all of them and making decisions about what you want to emphasize, what questions you want for your students to be asking, because it's a very complicated and very engaging history.